Alright guys, welcome to chapter 3 of AICE International History. This chapter is all about the League of Nations in the 1930s. So last chapter was League of Nations in the 20s, this one is the 30s, so it's basically the same 6, 7, same thing. Just different decade. So let's get into it. Alright, so 3.2 talks about the League of Nations itself in the 1930s. Now, 3.2a talks about why disarmament didn't work. So first, the World Disarmament Conference of 1932 to 1933 did not work. First, France obviously refused to compromise with Germany. Who's surprised? Me looking for anyone who's surprised, because who is really surprised? Also, Hitler insisted that Germany should be allowed to rearm. Hitler was like, no, guys, we need to rearm, we need to secure. People were not agreeing with this because they felt like a rearmed Germany would be once again a threat to Europe. Also, the Great Depression. Now, the Great Depression had made, like I said before, a lot of people lean towards extremism. Extreme governments obviously would not want to give up their arms so easily. They would want to keep their hold on power for as long as they could. And that was a huge effect of the Great Depression on international relations in the 1930s. And therefore, these new governments would not allow themselves to disarm. Then when Japan invaded Manchuria in 1932, it showed that they were not ready to disarm, so that kind of booted them from the conference. And just all these factors lumped up together, Hitler wanting to rearm, France refusing to agree with Hitler, and Japan doing their own thing, and every country being crippled economically just led to a whole turmoil and a failure of that conference. Then, to add insult to injury, Germany withdraws from the League of Nations in 1933, leading to less hopes of peaceful cooperation with that country. And then also, once the conference failed, international armaments policies, which were policies that controlled how countries would arm themselves and how they would relate to each other, they were very affected as they were seen as now inefficient and outdated, and that disarmament was really just a fantasy of the Treaty of Versailles, people who made the Treaty of Versailles, and that it wasn't really a real thing that could happen. Now, two more ways that the League of Nations failed was in their failures to control or mitigate the situations in Manchuria and Abyssinia. So, in Manchuria, Japan did not want to withdraw from their territory that they had already acquired in Manchuria. The League decided to create an investigating commission and the Lytton Report. The Lytton Report basically said that, yeah, Japan's in the wrong. And then you know what Japan said? Japan gave them the ultimate FU and left the League in 1934. So, in case you guys didn't get that, Japan didn't want to leave Manchuria. Once the League investigated the situation and came out with the Lytton Report, they were like, Japan, you're wrong. Japan was like, okay, if I'm so wrong, then I'm leaving. They were like, oh, this was Japan. This was the League's face. They're like, oh, they were shook. And then also, Japan was not getting opposed. Britain and France were like, you know what? Let them go. He was good while he was here. And that was the most resistance they put up. They didn't want to get into an issue because, like I said before, they were weak. They were weak economically, they were weak militarily, they weren't ready for war, so they wanted to postpone it as much as possible. Then Abyssinia. Abyssinia was when Italy invaded Ethiopia. That was the crisis of Abyssinia. Then France and Britain once again did not take action against Italy. Their own interests were not threatened. Italy was not immediately threatening their territory in Africa or much less anything else that interested them. So they weren't going to do anything. And also, they didn't want to go to war. So why go to war over something that wasn't even threatening them? And then they were also in the stressor front with Britain, France, and Italy in it. So why would they go against Italy if they were in a stressor front with them? And then basically this led to Britain and France acting out of self-interest. They only gave minor sanctions to Italy, and they signed secret negotiations like the Laval Pact, which ended up just cementing the fact that the League was weak against these two countries, that these two countries were basically in control of the League. Now, the League also failed to intervene or to effectively mitigate the Spanish Civil War because they said, oh, guys, don't get involved. What's the first thing that the powers do? Get involved. So just know that wasn't really the League's best moment. And also, when Japan invaded China in 1937, they failed to protect China once again, just like in Manchuria. The League just kept screwing up during the 1930s, and it kept showing, and people were increasingly more resentful towards them for this. From Manchuria to Abyssinia to Japan and China in 1937, the League could not keep its word to maintaining to peace, and when they did, it was a peace that was only in the interest of Britain and France mainly, but also in general the victorious powers of World War I, which is exactly what Hitler said, that this was just an association made to benefit the victors. Furthermore, the weaknesses of the League that we discussed in Chapter 2 are being highlighted more than ever now in this chapter, as Hitler resented the League of Nations as he associated it with the Treaty of Versailles that, as we know, he was trying to overturn. So he really resented them as an organization because, guilty by association. You are the same thing as the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles is the same thing as you, so why would I trust you? Also, Mussolini saw the League as having a huge bias towards Britain and France and as a way for Britain and France to exert their power over Europe. Now, bias is the support or opposition of a particular opinion in an unfair way, such as manipulating or distorting evidence. Now, he felt that Britain and France kept manipulating the League to work in their favor without acknowledging the worldwide scope of what they were actually doing. Now, also, the smaller nations that joined the League for security saw that the League was not really doing anything to confront aggression. They saw that they were letting Germany do whatever they wanted as far as we're concerned. They also saw that what was going on in China and Japan, like they weren't being protected. They saw that Abyssinia wasn't being protected. So like, what is the League even doing to confront aggression and to fight aggressive countries in our doorstep? They're not really doing anything. So this led countries like weaker countries that joined for protection against major powers to be like, what are we even doing here? They kept rethinking why they were even in the League. Also, with the failures of collective security is basically the idea that all these countries would pitch in their own militaries to help the League defend itself. And once this failed, it was like the League just didn't have any military power. So it was like useless pretty much. Like the League just became more and more useless as time went on. And this ended up really harming the League's image internationally and with major powers that really affected their basis of operation. Also, the fact that Britain and France put their own interests before committing to the League, this showed in instances obviously in the 1920s where they would they would give Poland like special passes of like invading Russia. They didn't really care about Russia, but then they let Poland invade Russia because they liked Poland better. Britain and France, who were mainly the ones in control of the League, if we're being so for real right now, they kept putting the interest of themselves over the interest of the world, and this made them highly unpopular in the League and basically with any peacekeeping organization. They wouldn't want to work with them because they're like, no, they're selfish people. We don't want to work with them. And that led to basically the dissolution of the League, and now the League is basically powerless as we go into this next very tumultuous era of European politics. Okay guys, anyways, thank you so much for sticking around. I hope you guys become more educated. Hope this actually helped you guys. And yeah, I hope you guys actually learned from this video. Don't forget